So last time we added an adjustment layer for a lens flare. We added a mask to make the vignette effect. We also added another adjustment layer that's just noise. And then we added the brush effect to the character art, which we can see there. So we'll go over a couple of different types of effects where we can actually add some more content into the scene. So one effect that's very popular that you'll see used a lot is a particle effect. And particle effects can really be used for lots and lots of different things. Depending on what you might want to use a particle effect for, you can do a lot of different stuff with it. When you first create one, it's going to look a little ridiculous. So let's go ahead and create a particle effect. I'm going to look at the instructions here. So it's very similar to what we have done with our other ones, but we're going to have a lot more properties to work with. So I'm going to add another solid. So I'm going to go to layer, go to new solid, and I'll call this particle. It doesn't really matter what color we choose here, so I'm just going to hit OK. And now I'm going to search for my particle effect. So I'm going to type in particle. You can see there's a few different types, and they kind of have similar properties, but they will do slightly different things. So let's look at the particle world. And so I'm going to throw that on our particle layer. And it's already got a lot of stuff going on right from the beginning. So as soon as we add this in here, we have this like big firework effect. But you don't have to use it for like something really crazy like this. You can use it for more subtle effects. You could use it for like some dust, when the character steps. You could use it for a little fog or clouds or other things like that. So let's look at some of the parameters, and let's actually turn off our character for a second because they're kind of in the same place. And you'll notice that at the beginning of the scene, the particle effect is just starting, and then it kind of just goes until the end of the scene. It also is 3D, so if I go into my other views, and I look from like the left, you can see it has the same sort of shape from the left or the top. So it's actually like a 3D particle system, but we only see it in 2D, of course. So let's look at some of the parameters. Make that a little bit bigger. So for our particle world, we have a whole lot of different stuff. We can change the position, so I can kind of move this around. We can change the size. We can change the direction. There's all sorts of stuff with it we can change here to change the way that it looks. So that's all, I'm just manipulating those things with the mouse, but you can see over here, you have the grid and guides, and you can turn those on or off to be able to see what's in there, and the grid floor as well. You can change where the grid sort of starts from. So you can really move stuff around. You can change how many parts there are in the grid. This just kind of helps you see visually where the particle system is going. And then you can change the size of the grid. That's just to kind of visualize where the particle system is. Then the birth rate is how many particles are created. So if it's 0, you're not going to get any particles at all. If it's 20, you're going to get a lot of particles every frame. So if we want fewer particles overall, we would do like 1, and we'll get fewer particles. If we want more, we'll do more. There's a bunch of other things. The longevity is how long the particles last. So if I increase that, we're going to see that the particle life actually goes longer, so we don't get to that red part. If I make the longevity very short, then the particles just kind of turn red and disappear pretty quickly. So that's another property that has a lot of effect over the what we end up seeing here. I'm going to move this down a little so we can see more of this. So let's leave the longevity kind of short. And then, so we have the birth rate, longevity, we have the producer. This is like where the particles originate from, so we can move this around. We can move it down in the scene. We could put it down here. We can kind of move it wherever we want. And then we can also move it on the z-axis. So notice now that I've moved it down here, it's getting cut off a little bit. So if I position on the z, it's going to change how much of the particles we see. And I can change the radius, which is how wide the particle system is. So you can see if I change the x radius, the positioning of that particle system gets much wider. So we can fill the whole scene with particles. And there's sort of a distribution where there's more particles in the middle than on the outside. We can change the y, which is how high the particles are going to go, and we can change the z, which is the depth of the particles. So there's a lot of parameters we can play around with there. We can animate all of those. Then we also have the physics, so we can change, there's different animations. We could do like a fire particle system. Let's actually turn up the longevity because it's kind of hard to see. So with the fire system, they kind of go straight up in the air. Although I think we kind of inverted our particle system. So let's try going like that. We might need to reset some of these defaults. Okay, maybe just leave it where it was. So you can see the behavior of the particles changes when we change the animation style. We can change the speed, we can change the gravity. There's all these different things we can change. We don't have to go into all of them. But let's look at the particle, because this is where we can actually change the color. So when the particle is first created, it's going to have one color. I'm going to actually increase the birth rate again so we can see more particles. Let's do like 5. So there's a color that the particle system starts at, and then there's a color that it goes to when it dies. So we could match the scene, although I think I need to reset the size of these things. Okay, there we go. And let's move it down a little bit in the scene. Okay, there we go. So we can change the colors. Let's go back to that. So we have the birth color and the death color. So if we take the birth color, maybe we'll choose, oh, here we go. Maybe we'll choose one of the colors from the background, one of these pink colors. And then for the death color, maybe we'll do just like black. So we'll get a it'll kind of blend into the background. And then we can also create our own color map where we add different colors at various points along that way, so we don't have to just have 2. You can also change the direction that the colors go in. We can add a texture, so you can actually add like an image that gets created for each color. We can change the shape. So if we change this to stars, suddenly we're going to have a lot of stars. If we change it to bubbles, we'll have some bubbles. So you can really play around with this. There's a lot of different options. You can have little cubes. We could have some spheres. We could have a little lens. That's kind of cool, although we don't get the same color. Let's see. Oh, we don't have this. Okay, so if we want a texture, we can use one of these. We can use triangles. So there's lots of different options for how the particles look. And then there's other stuff in here where we can set like the distance from the camera. We can set the depth cue. We can set it to fog so it fades out in the background. So there's a lot of different kind of little things that we can do, and we can also animate all of these. We can also, where do we set the we can randomize things like the size. So the birth size and death size, we can make them start larger and get smaller. There's all sorts of stuff we can do. We can do size variation. So if we turn that up, there'll be more size variation. If we turn it down, there'll be less size variation. We can change the rotation speed. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here. And so we can get this kind of effect. It's not centered on the screen right now, so I'd want to fill that in. But let's add our character back in. Let's see if that looks cool. And then maybe we turn the opacity down on the layer just so it kind of blends in a little bit more. Okay, so that's the particle system. There's obviously lots and lots of different things you can do with that. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger so it fills in the whole screen. And so you can kind of have fun with that. You can also make like little particle systems that react to like specific events, like when the foot hits the ground or something. You could just have like a little dust appear or something like that. But there really is a lot to play with there, so obviously we can't go into everything. So let's leave that there, and then there's one more effect that we want to cover, which is another noise effect. And so for this one, I'm going to add another solid. So let's open my layers. I'm going to go to layer and go to new solid. And for this one, I'm going to do kind of a dark gray. And I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to call this my smoke layer. It doesn't have to be smoke, but smoke is kind of the example that's given. And for this one, I'm going to use something called fractal noise, which is really fun to use because it's like noise, but it's not just completely noisy. It has like a shape to it. So if I take this fractal noise and throw it on there, this is what that looks like. It sort of looks like marble, or depending on how you design it in the scene, you can make it look like different sort of natural things. There's a whole bunch of properties again for our fractal noise, but one that we will want to animate is the evolution. So if we keyframe the evolution of the noise and then animate that over time, you'll see that the noise kind of moves. So I'm just going to go to 2 here. And so it'll just kind of move the noise around. Actually, 2 is a little bit much. Let's just do 1. And so this is another thing where you could just blend this in with the background, or you could combine this with a mask to make an effect. So let's do that. So I'm going to save this here. You can change a bunch of stuff here. So I could change the blending mode to overlay, or other things like that, and turn the opacity down. It doesn't really look like it's blending. I guess maybe I need to move it below. I probably have to move it down here. There we go. Okay, so let's move it down all the way down there. Well, now, okay, I have too many effects now. Let's just turn off a few of these effects so we can just focus on this. Okay, so there's our smoke effect. And so we can set the area for this. So we can play around with these, but let's set the area. So I'm going to make another mask here. I'm going to just do a little circle. Oops. Okay, let's make sure to select my layer first. Okay, so notice now when I make a circle, I'm just masking out this particular section. And so I can kind of just keep the effect in that section. And then, so if I take my mask, I'm going to leave it on add. But you could also do something like lighten or darken might be cool, although I don't really see much changing there. Anyway, let's add a bit of a feather. And let's turn the opacity down a little bit. And let's expand just a little bit, or actually let's go in just a little bit, the other direction. And so now we get this kind of like little animated version of the smoke, which could be like a cloud or something like that. or it could be other just texture or grain in your animation. So there's a bunch of other stuff that we can set here. I'm going to turn the opacity back up for a second and make this bigger so we can see this. Let's transform. Oops, no. Uh-oh, where did I go? I hit a key command that I didn't mean to hit. Oh, I accidentally created a new layer. Let's just delete that. Okay. Uh-oh, somehow I lost... I accidentally hit something that made this disappear. I can't really see all of my... Let's go to the camera view. Okay, there we go. Okay. So there's our little smoke guy, and we can animate that around and do different stuff with that. And if we change things like the contrast or the brightness, we can get different effects. So if I turn the contrast up a lot, we get sort of more blocks of shading. If I turn it down a lot, we just kind of get a blur. So you can get different cool effects with that. We can invert the colors. We can change different noise types. If we do, we can play around with those and see we can get some different effects that way. There's a whole bunch of other stuff in here, like if we want to make, it has kind of like some defaults for different types of textures. Like we could do a terrain texture. So there's a lot of stuff to play around with in here. And then what I'm looking for is... No, not that. Oh, we can... Alright, set the... Oh yeah, we already set this. Okay, so we can set the blending mode so it blends in with the background. So let's see what that looks like. So there's no real reason why I would have some smoke moving right here, but just as an example of kind of a cool effect we can get, it adds some nice texture, and we can kind of use that to create like liquids or gases, like different things that we might have in our scene to make it look a little more realistic or add some different textures into the scene. Okay, so again, there's a lot of different effects, and all of those effects have like tons of different properties, and you can animate all those properties. So you can get a little lost in the weeds with effects, but if you have specific ideas for things that you want to try, we could talk about how to do that. And you know, if you have, you can really just kind of like play around with different stuff and see how it looks, and some things might make sense with what you're doing visually, some things may not make sense with what you're doing visually. So at least for the assignment purposes, you just have to do 2 effects, but you can add a lot more if you want to. So I would just play around with those and find a couple that make sense for your project. Okay.